Hi, this is Agnes, and I'm back with my Letters to Agnese project. This is the third in an installment of several videos explaining my long-term project into what a pregnancy at the turn of the 15th to 16th century Calais would be like for my persona, specifically her first pregnancy. If you look back to my other videos, you will see that I've used a lot of primary documents, including letters of one of the Medici women, to help frame the tone and context of my letters. So, letter to the second. First, I'm going to read the letter to you, and then we're going to go through it footnote by footnote and talk about where the content of this letter comes from and kind of break it down. Because after all, these letters are really been designed to be a research project in a form that is fun to read. Who doesn't want to read a letter, right? Um, and easy to consume in a small time period and more accessible than a long research paper. Not that there's anything wrong with research papers. They are awesome too. All right, moving on. 27 July, 1562. Dearest Agnese, today I have arranged to send a small casket of your mother's goods to you in Calais, as well as gifts fitting a woman with child. In this you will discover a small head of your blessed mother made of plaster wrapped carefully, so it may reach you safely. I am also sending the Majolica plate with the infant Jesus and his cousin John the Baptist to play. Both brought you great comfort as a child and will calm any distress you should feel in the months to come. In your last letter, you wrote to me of the great disruption during the construction of the new citadel. While enduring this work may seem tedious, do remember it will aid in keeping you and yours safe for generations to come. You also wrote of your fears for the pains and great work that awaits you at the end of your pregnancy. Know that I am in search of a breve to lie upon your stomach, as well as herbs to ease pain. While not Medici ourselves, our family has been of service to the great house for many years, and I'll be able to access not only their herbals, but their extensive gardens. Yours in love and family, Leonardo. All right, let's take this letter apart, line by line, footnote by footnote, and really explain what's being conveyed here. All right, so we have today I've arranged to send a small casket of your mother's goods to you in Calais, as well as gifts fitting a woman with child. So over here we have a footnote, and it says, it was not uncommon for husbands and families to give gifts to pregnant women and again to her after their delivery. And then it talks about signed, sealed, and delivered, one of the journal articles I really like that went very in deep depth about not just the complications of pregnancy from a medical point of view, but from a financial standpoint. And from gift giving and socially, how do we approach this topic in that time period, which is so fraught with peril, and keep this woman from focusing on possibly horrific endings for her or the child. All right, it says, in this you will discover the small head of your blessed mother, made of plaster wrapped carefully so it may reach you safely. So art of women when they were married was very important. Art in the Italian family was very important. If you think about how dire childbirth could be, it's really important for a child to be able to see what their mother looked like should mother die in childbirth with them or with a sibling. Often artwork inside the home was the only way you might have a working memory or an idea of what the woman who bore you looked like. To live to old age was truly a feat in those days. So, it was very, very common to do this. It was not uncommon for family to kiss the statue or piece of art to keep that person alive or part of their daily things. So for little Agnese to have gone up and seen the face of her mother and given a kiss on the cheek would have been something normal she would have done growing up. Also, by giving it to her, should she survive, Agnese's daughter or son can see the face of their grandmother who passed away sort of there in the home to know what she would have looked like. Another thing that's interesting is Maria Salviati de' Medici requested a bust of her husband to be created and shipped to her in the same manner as this bust is described as having been shipped. When her husband passed away, Maria had commissioned a bust of him for the similar reason, to see his face on the regular. So in the letter, when Leonardo talks about this, she's actually talking about a period practice of how you would ship a small bust or figurine of someone who had passed in your family's face. She talks about the Majolica plate and the infant Jesus and his cousin John the Baptist at play. And the Majolica is described the purpose of art and its importance for education. So comportment education was something that children learn very young. How do you behave? How do we be quiet? What is expected of you? So often, religious art was actually hung up in a nursery or a birthing room, or areas where children may or may not come in contact with their mother to sort of help their comportment to be a good, well behaved member of society. Then we go on to talk about the construction of the Citadel in Calais. So this is one really interesting thing. We talk about daily lives, and in other letters and reference to letters that were used in writing some of the articles I read, people talk about their daily life. We could say this is analogous to people talked about the Big Dig in Boston. And so when you look at the context, the Citadel in Calais took a very long time to be built. It started in 1560 and then it took 30 years to complete. 30 years. And fun fact, one of the few things in Calais to it survive to this day is little bits and pieces of that citadel. The reason for that, unfortunately, World War One, World War Two, other wars in between there, Calais was very heavily damaged. So finding something from the time period of my persona in Calais, the Citadel is something that can kind of connect me, the reenactor, to Agnes, because it's one thing that I can know she would have looked on had she actually existed. She also talks about a breve. So a breve was something that was prayers written over and over. It could be sacred objects, saints' bones, blessed things from pilgrimage. These were like little packets that would be placed on a woman's belly or written out into an actual belt wrapped around her so that the prayers upon them would ease the pain and increase her ability to survive labor and delivery. So her grandmother says, I don't want you to die. I want you to survive this labor. Don't worry, I'm looking high and low for this religious amulet that's going to give you an extra edge. Also, she mentions not being Medici, but having access to their house. So one of the really interesting things about the Medici that I found in this is the Medici women actually spread women's health in a way throughout Europe. The Medici daughters, and keep in mind this is like sub-Medici's cousins and whatnot, would get letters and advice and herbs from the extensive gardens. So if you had a gynecological issue that needed to be treated, you might write to your Medici grandmother or aunt and say, hey, what do you have? She'd send you an herb. If maybe you were pregnant with your sixth child and you didn't want to actually say it in a letter, maybe she would get the gist of it and send you an abortifacient. Easing your labor, you're worried about bad labor and delivery, perhaps they would send you some herbs from that rather large pharmacopoeia of Medici gardens. The Medici women actually were responsible for a lot of women's health care indirectly by these letters and by knowledge that they shared out to their offspring who were all over the European continent. So it was an interesting little thing I wanted to work into there. Because keep in mind, each of these sub areas of research, something that's footnoted in this, was an area that I've researched over the past year or so, and tried to find a way to work into a very natural conversation about pregnancy.